Hi guys, we start this subject with the first unit that it's about secure communication. We have for this subject two topics, the session management. For this unit, the session management and transmission security. We start, remember, two concepts, the web application and web services. A web application is a client-server software application that interacts with users or other systems using HTTP protocol. And a web service is a collection of functions that are packaged as a single entity and published to the network for use by other applications. We need to know some other concepts. The first one is cybersecurity. A successful cybersecurity approach has multiple layers of protection spread across the computers, networks, program, or data that one intends to keep safe. In an organization, the people, process, and technology must all complement one another to create an effective defensive for cyber attacks. A unified threat management system can automate integrations across selected security products and accelerate key security functions like detect, investigate, and remediate. In the security exist three major actors: the people, the processes, and technology. People or users must understand and comply with basic data security principles like choosing a strong password, being wary of attachment in an email, and backing up the data. And the process or organizations must have a framework for how they deal with both attempt and successful cyber attack. One framework can guide and explains how you can identify attacks, protect systems, detect and respond to threats, and recover from successful attacks. And the technology is essential to giving organizations and individuals the computer security tools needed to protect themselves from cyber attacks. The main entities must be protected are endpoint devices like computers, smart devices, routers, networks, and the cloud, and many others, of course. And why is cybersecurity important? The world relies on technology more than ever before. As a result, digital data creation was surged. Today, individuals, business, and governments store a great deal of that data on devices and transmit it across networks to others. Devices and their underlying systems have vulnerabilities that, when exploited, undermine the health and objectives of an organization. There are many risks, some more serious than others. Among these risks or these dangers are malware erasing your entire system, an attacker breaking into your system and altering files, an attacker using your computer to attack others, or an attacker stealing your credit card information and making unauthorized purchases. And there is no guarantee that even with the best precautions, some of these things won't happen to someone. But there are steps that can be taken to minimize these chances or this risk, because if we have not a security level or a minimum security level, then we have a total open to these things happen. And we have to know some common types of cybersecurity or threats. The first one in the cybersecurity side is the network security that protects network traffic by controlling incoming and outgoing connections to prevent threats from entering or spreading on the network. The second is the data loss prevention that protects data by focusing on the location, classification, and monitoring of information at risk, in use, and in motion. The connection security, the cloud security, that provides protection for data used in cloud-based services and applications, of course. The intrusion detection system or intrusion prevention system work to identify potential hostile cyber activity. The identity and access management use authentication service to limit and track employee access to connect internal systems from malicious entities. The encryption is the process of encoding data to render it unintelligible and is often used during data transfer to prevent them theft in transit. Antivirus and anti-malware are solutions that scan computer systems from known threats. Modern solutions are even able to detect previously unknown threats based on their behavior. And common types of cyber threats, we have the malware, that is a malicious software such as computer virus, spyware, Trojan horses, and keyloggers. We have the ransomware, that is a malware that locks and encrypts data until ransom is paid. Phishing attacks, the practice of obtaining sensitive information, example password, credit card information, that through a distinct email, phone call, or text message. The social engineering, the psychological manipulation of individuals to obtain confidential information. We have the last one, this advanced persistent threat, an attack in which an unauthorized user gains access to a system or network and remains there for an extended period of time without being detected. We need to know what is a session. A session is nothing but a server-side storage of users' information to persist the activity with the website. Usually all the servers generate a session for that connection with a unique session token which is known as a session ID. For example, whenever you log into the website, the server will store your information in your system as a cookie. This cookie will help with authentication. Since the server generates a session ID for the user, the client doesn't need to provide their information on each subsequent request. The client or the browser usually stores and sends the token as a cookie to the server. When the user clicks on the logout link, the cookie with the session ID will be deleted and the server will terminate the user's activity. That is something that you probably use in your last project for giving permission to somewhere or denying the access to somewhere else depending the credentials. And then what is a cookie? Similar to a session, a cookie also stores the data on the client's computer. Cookies are created when you use your browser to visit a website that use cookies to keep track on the movements within the site, allow you to resume where you left off, remembers your register login, theme selection, preference, and other customization functions. And for that, we need to know what is identification. Identification occurs when a user claims or professes an identity. This can be accomplished with a username, a process ID, a smart card, or anything else that can uniquely identify a subject. Security systems use this identity when determining if a subject can access an object. And authentication is the process of identifying a user, a system, or a thing in a unique manner to prove that is the one who it claims to be. Authentication can be directed or brokered based on how you bring your authentication assertions. If you directly log in to a system just providing your username and password, it falls under direct authentication. In other words, under direct authentication, the entity which wants to authenticate itself presents the authentication assertions to the service it wants to access. Under brokered authentication, there is a third party involved. This third party is commonly known as an identity provider. When you log in into your custom API, for example, via Facebook, it falls under brokered authentication, and Facebook is the identity provider. With brokered authentication, the service provider, in this case Facebook, doesn't trust you directly. It only trusts an identity provider, and you can access the service only if the trust identity provider pays a positive assertion to the service provider. Authentication can be done in a single factor or in multiple factors. Something you know, or something you are, and something you have are the well-known three factors of authentication. For multi-factor authentication, a system should use a combination of at least two factors. Combining two techniques that fall under the same category isn't considered multi-factor authentication. For example, entering a username and a password and then a PIN number isn't considered multi-factor authentication because both fall under something you know or the same category. And what's mean authorization? Authorization, it's the process of validating what actions an authenticated user, a system, or thing can perform within a well-defined system boundary. Authorization happens with the assumption that the user is already authenticated. We have discretionary access control and mandatory access control, like the two prominent models to control access in a system. Once a user is identified and authenticated, they can be granted authorization based on their proven identity. It's important to point out that you can't have separate authorization without identification and authentication. In other words, if everyone logs on With the same account, you can grant access to resources for everyone or block access to their resources for everyone. If everyone uses the same account, you can differentiate between users. However, when users have been authenticated with different user accounts, they can be granted access to different resources based on their identity. In summary, it's important to understand the difference between identification, authentication, and authorization. Identification occurs when a subject claims an identity, for example, the username, and authentication occurs when the subject provides their identity, for example, when the user typed the password. Once the subject has a proven identity, authorization techniques can grant or block access to objects based on their proven identities. And that's the authorization. What is access control? Access control is a security technique that regulates who or what can view or use resources in a computer environment. It is a fundamental concept in security that minimizes risk to the business or organization. There are two types of access control, the physical and logical. Physical access control limits access to campus, buildings, rooms, and physical IT assets. And logical access control limits connections to computer, network, system files, and data. To secure a facility, organizations use electronic access control systems that rely on user credentials, access card readers, auditing, and reports to track employee access to restricted business locations and proprietary areas, such as data centers, for example. And some of these systems incorporates access control panels to restrict entry to rooms and buildings, as well as alarms to lock down capabilities to prevent unauthorized access or operations. And the logical side, we have, for example, a system that locks some modules or functions depending of your permissions or credentials inside this system or web page, and you control it by the session itself. And what is access control system? That is the other part. We in the access control system perform identification, authentication, and authorization of users and entities by evaluating required login credentials that can include password, personal identification numbers, biometric scans, security tokens, or other authentication factors. And we have a multi-factor authentication, which requires 2 or more authentication factors. It's often an important part of layer defense to protect access control systems. These security controls works by identifying an individual or entity, verifying that the person or application is who or what it claims to be, and authorizing the access level and set of actions associated with the username or IP address. There are some services and protocols, including the Logical Directory Access Protocol and the Security Assertion Markup Language, that provide access control for authenticating and authorizing users and entities, and enabling them to connect to computer resources such as distributed applications and web servers. These protocols are for Linux systems, and we have the same kind of protocol of services in the Windows using Active Directory, and the security assignments of permissions in the system for file system or for some web services or another kind of services. Organizations use different access control models depending on their compliance requirements and the security levels of information technology they are trying to protect. We have some types of access control. The main types of access or more commons are the mandatory access control and discretionary access control. The mandatory access control is a security model in which access rights are regulated by a central authority based on multiple levels of security, often used in government and military environments. Classifications are assigned to system resource and the operation system or security kernel. Grants or denies access to those resources objects based on the information security clearance of the user or device. For example, the security enhanced Linux in an implementation of Mac or on the Linux operating system. The discretionary access control, an access control method in which owners or administrators of the protected system, data, or resource set the policies defining who or what is authorized to access the resource. Many of these systems enable administrators to limit the propagation of access rights. A common criticism of discretionary access control systems is a lack of centralized control. The role-based access control, it's a widely used access control mechanism that restricts access to computer resources based on individuals or groups with defined business functions. For example, executive level 1, engineer level 1 or 2, etc. rather than the identities of individual users. The role-based security model relies on a complex structure of role assignments, role authorizations, and role permissions developed using role engineering to regulate employee access to systems. The rule-based access control, it's a security model in which the system administrator defines the rules that to govern access to resource objects. Often these rules are based on conditions such as time to day or location. It is not uncommon to use some from output rule-based access control and role-based access control to enforce access policies and procedures. The attribute-based access control, it's a methodology that manages access rights by evaluating a set of rules, policies, and relationships using the attributes of user, system, and environmental conditions. And that's the main types of access control. Then we need to know the use of access control. The goal of access control is to minimize the risk of unauthorized access to logical systems. Access control is a fundamental component of security compliance programs that ensures security technology and access control policies are in place to protect confidential information such as customer data, for example. Most organizations have infrastructure and procedures that limit access to networks, computer system, applications, files, and sensitive data. For example, a personally identifiable, identifiable information and intellectual property. That kind of information it's very sensitive and we need to protect by some access control. And implementing access control, we have three main, or when we are integrating users into an application, there are three main aspects to consider, and these aspects are representing or storing users in a database, the user authentication, and the access control. The access control is a process that is integrated into an organization, its environment. It can involve identity and access management system. This system provides access controls software, a user database, and management tools for access control policies. When a user is added to an access management system, the system administrator uses an automated provisioning system to set up permission based on access control frameworks, job responsibilities, and workflows. The best practice of less privilege restrict access to only resources that a user requires to perform their immediate functions. A common security issue is failure to revoke credentials and access to systems and data when a user moves into a different section internally or leaves the system. And we need to pay attention to this kind of issues. There are a few things we'll need in the application when we are implementing this access control. We have a diagram that explains the process we need to follow to know if we are having a right authentication. We need maybe a login pages. We need to pay attention for the authentication functionality or the process for logins and logouts, when happen and what users need to stay in our application, the session interfaces alteration based on a user login status. For example, when a user is logging and show them a logout link in the main menu. When logout, we need to change or show them a login link. And of course we need to has a good access control functionality, having the right permissions for the right users. And that's it, guys. See you soon in the next video. For this unit we finish with the first topic, and remember, proudly UTR.